September 30th, 2020 at 6 p.m. at the W.C. O'Neill Arena. Recording of attendance, I note that we have 4 members of council in attendance. Missing this evening are Councillor Bishop, Councillor Harrison, and Councillor Gumichel. But we do have quorum in order to conduct this discussion. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as written. Thank you, Councillor Gu, and the seconder, Councillor Akaji. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. I'll look to disclosure of conflict of interest for any matter before council this evening. Seeing none, we have no presentations, no communications, and we are moving to introduction and consideration of passing of bylaws and motions. We're moving to FA 200704, Council Workshop 2021 Budget Discussions. Mr. Spear, could you kind of lead us into this evening and recap of where we're at and where we need to get to tonight?
Sure, Your Worship. Thank you for giving staff the opportunity to continue this presentation, both to yourselves and those that may be listening in on the feed. So last meeting a couple of weeks ago, we did have a discussion just on the general operating funds. Staff had recommended a 1 cent had put in place a 1 cent increase for discussion, which council is kind of still debating, and it's certainly not final. And so the staff mostly has held costs or reduced costs for the general operating, realizing COVID's probably going to be an issue next year. And in order to be prepared to battle that, we've maintained our staffing levels and our service levels at this point in time. If there's any additional services that council would like to see, it's really up to you to bring them forward, I guess, during these discussions, and we can work them into the budget. But at this point in time, especially in recognition that it's your last few months of your mandate, my experience has shown that councils usually aren't eager to jump into something too new this far in, but certainly you have the legal authority, and feel free to express yourselves that way if you have anything else that you'd like to see to add. So tonight we're going to pick up on page 19 of the budget documents before you, which is the general capital budget. So these are items not related to the utility fund. Is everybody with me? All right. So one of the first items is computer and accessories. We've been going at $7,500 a year roughly for a few years now. I did notice a sharp increase. We replaced a couple of computers in the town hall this year, and they're up about 25 or 30% over they were a year ago. I think there's a lot of stuff that's up higher now because of COVID, but within staff, that should do good. Most of our computers are less than 2 years old. They've been replaced per schedule, and so we're pretty good. There's a question that may come up. We don't necessarily have to talk about it now, but some new councillors don't have really good technology when they come onto council. And I'm not sure if council would like to consider some type of policy in order to either, in the first year of a mandate, to buy laptops for councillors so they're able to have that. Or we could even talk about a buyback scheme, basically where we become a bit of a bank. We buy a laptop and then take so much money out of their stipend over a year, something to pay it back. But it's not unusual. The town had bought some older laptops in the past. I won't say older, but economy, we'll call them, and they don't last very well, truth be told. So I guess there's a question if we want to talk about that, increasing the budget tonight by another couple of $1,000 for just in case, and creating a policy or what have you.
Your Worship, Councillor Gu.
Thank you. I think rather than go through a line-by-line description of all of the projects here, and they're quite numerous, I would suggest that we need to have, skip forward and look at the total. Right now, we're forecasting $7.2 million in projects for the year 2021. We're looking at borrowing $1.5 million and dipping $500,000 into our reserve funds. And I would suggest that before we start looking at all of these projects, might be useful to determine what is council's tolerance for debt this year? Or what's our tolerance for debt? How far do we want to dip into the reserve funds? And that's going to affect, to a large extent, what projects can be done. Because I'm sure that every one of these projects are worthwhile projects, but can we afford to do them all is the real question that I have anyway.
Okay, Councillor Grew. Deputy Mayor, a thought on that?
Well, there's two ways to go about it. You can start from the top down, or you can do kind of zero-based budgeting where you start from the ground floor and add things in as you can do them. So there's two ways of building out a budget, but I think in order, there's no question we're going to have to probably remove some stuff. I think staff's probably anticipating that as well. But I think in order for council to make better decisions on that, we should have an understanding line by line of what these items are and what the impacts will be on our staff. So,
Because it's 4 or 5 pages of projects right now, and sitting here listening to the merits of 5 pages of projects, this could take up 2 meetings. And if we get to the bottom line and say, oh, golly gee, we can only do $5 million worth of projects, and that's only if we get the funding, it's a waste of our time.
but your worship, if staff's looking for us to make that decision or be part of that decision making, then we need to understand what all these projects are. Otherwise, we might as well just say, come in at this number and that's the end of this meeting and come back with your revised budget.
That's what I would do, is I'd say it's unacceptable to have $7 million worth of projects. And in my mind, borrowing 1.5 million and taking 500 out of our reserve funds, it's not sustainable. And I would suggest that if council reduces that number substantially, then goes back to staff and say, here's the level of funding we can live with. Please come up with a program that fits that. Staff can then come back to us with a program or a capital program that meets the requirements. And we don't have to parse through 5 pages of descriptions and go through each project. And it's painful. And I think it can be done a lot easier if we as councillors make the big decisions.
Well, that's assuming that we as councillors agree with you in terms of the approach. Some of us might think that $7 million is worth the expenditure next year. And that, but I don't know, that's going to be up to each person to decide that. I think, is there some compromise here rather than going through? We have different, we've got town hall, we've got streets and sidewalks, we've got other, can we look at those as a package and just say, is that too much for that particular type of expenditure, and we want to go back to it and cut some of that? In terms of our tolerance, it's a difference, it's a philosophical difference between borrowers and savers on our council. That's exactly what it comes down to, in my opinion. You know, I'm a borrower. Sorry, but I am. Mr. Spear, what do you think?
If you give me 20 minutes, I'll skip through. I'll just go really quick, brief descriptions. I promise to get all through 5 pages. A lot of the stuff will be known to council anyway, so won't go too depth into them. I'll just do it really quick, because I think, if at least to remind some of the councillors what everything is, and I can promise you that by 6:30, 6:40, we'll be through the whole thing, at least a description of what.
Okay, let's go with that, and then we will move to talk about the level of expenditure as an overall question. Okay, thank you, Mr. Spear. Carry on.
All right. So going down the list, $5,000 we're requesting at Town Hall. Basically behind the town desk, there's a coat rack that we'd like to take out and create a better hallway. If anyone's been in Town Hall right now, because of the COVID thing, we've had to put up a big screen. We can operate without it, but it'd look a lot better if we had that there. It'd create less mess and less congestion. The $19,500 for the pocket, the pilot project picket fences, rename that so I can speak faster, is creating sorry. Did you guys get, a couple of weeks ago, we gave out a description of
Yes.
an asset manager, and on page 2 or 3 of that, there's this picket fence model that says
Right.
barricades. That's what that's for. That would be basically following the same imprint on the same plan this year, using that picket fence style everywhere. There's potential to use other styles, like say, planters that you put ropes in between or something, that can be reduced, but that would be probably the best looking, at least, and from staff's perspective, the safest, because anything that has a rope, we're afraid people will jump over and jump into traffic. The small washroom at Indian Point, as discussed before, is a 2-door facility, one that is accessible, that would be likely close to the walking trail. There's some discussions, if council supports this, where it exactly would be placed, because it could be a problem for the view of some of the residents, but that's what that is. That's just up for consideration, but there is, as you know, we rent porta potties now, and they only run like $300 or $400 a season at that particular location. The boat ramp by the yacht club is in pretty bad shape. People have been asking about that being done. It's going to have to be dug out and repaved this year, but once it's done, it should be good for 30 or 40 years. Resurfacing roads is following the asset management plan. It's probably less than we really should be doing, but realizing there's a limit of how much we can borrow, staff reduced it to that much. There's a larger plan included that names all the streets, but we won't necessarily go through that. Under street ends, we want to complete the Elizabeth Street Pocket Park. So as you know, $50,000 is coming from the Dunn Foundation this year to fix up the street end down there. The street end will be in usable condition. The extra 40 next year, I may need some help, is for fencing and more tables and chairs to go out there. But if council, if we can, that could be cut some more, but certainly we discussed earlier in the fall, kind of a grand idea of there. The washrooms aren't going to be included there right now. We decided it's too much of an expense. Right. Still under budget 2021. There's a third phase of disconnecting the arena from the sanitary. So as you were aware, up until this past spring, the whole building was going into the sanitary sewer system on Reed Avenue. So 2/3 of the building has been disconnected. Now there's one additional part. It's going to cost about $62,000 to do that. Prince of Wales phase 2. No, sorry, just Prince of Wales, $288,100. So I may have to let the asset manager talk about that a little bit, but we talked about last meeting about creating a wider shoulder on Prince of Wales, and now we've got pricing to move it over to the western side only, so it's all on one side. So if we're going to do that with the storm sewers, the water mains, sewer mains, and then the pavement will be widened all at once. If council decides that not widening, like creating that walking trail up towards the real, or the Van Horn Trail isn't important, I think we could not do the sewer mains, is that correct? Yeah, that could be deferred for a few years. They're due very soon, but it doesn't have to be done next year. So that's only going to be done if council believes that we should widen that road and create a better walking trail. Under public works equipment, we need to replace just one of those big commercial mowers. Those things go along all summer. The one we have is 10 or 11 years old and starting to fall apart. Then there's 2 or 3 other smaller items below that. One is a canopy for mowers, which are, especially this summer in the month of August, it's so hot, our guys are getting awful warm. So we just thought basically a covering to protect them with 3 mowers, I think that is. And then a container shed for public works. And actually, it's the whole water equipment. And within the zoning bylaw, there's actually an amendment that's going to be brought forward to allow more shipping containers in there. It's really the cheapest alternative, and everything is hidden by trees and stuff there. It's, you know, probably the best thing. You get those for $4,000 or $5,000. You hold a lot of equipment, and they're secure. And our crew does put a roof on them in order to give them a better appearance and to reduce the rainwater on top of them. On page 21, So the top item is, there's a sidewalk that we keep deferring out front here, but we're looking today, and the thing actually is in pretty bad shape. If you go out tonight or up again, you'll see that the individual slabs are tilted in different directions. It's also, it would be better to crown it towards the front, but right now some of the water's pooling back towards the front of the building. So after a melt and then a refreeze, you're getting a lot of ice along there. So it's just to redo that whole section. It originally was brought forward, I think, in 2019, and we just keep deferring it. But it's really, that's an important project. That resurfaced, the oil tank rehabilitation, we've done about most of it this year, but due to the shape it was in and the extent of it, they're asking us to do testing wells and things, 3 testing wells. That one isn't really, that one's being requested / enforced by the Department of Environment. So that one will have to be brought forward as is. Then going down real quick, we need to just put some insulation over the top of the roof here in the center section area. It's about 6,000. The display sign, in that report we gave you, we showed that there's 2 options for that council can talk about. One, there was a granite style monument that looked pretty nice, or to go back more to the traditional what we have here. And that the current posts are in pretty rough shape, and that white lettering area is just about ready to fall over, fall off. So something has to be done out there. Upgrade keys and locks. Any of you follow Tim Sharkey through here, he has about 400 keys for this building. So we've gone through some steps this year to just get more master keys in here to try to really reduce the number of things. But just for the sheer volume of locks here, that it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 year, well, this year will be the last year at $6,000. The display sign, sorry, was 22,000. I'm getting ahead of myself here. The third, so the rink was originally built with 3 compressors, which was fantastic during the hockey school days. But with more technology and the lack of a summer ice, we can decommission one of them, so it's just less wear and tear, and it'll be repiped so that the ammonia and all the stuff is running through it. So it's a $7,000 cost just to decommission it. It has to be contracted out because of its an ammonia system. It's recommended, but I don't know it's necessity, but it's highly recommended. It hasn't been used for years. $5,500 was requested from a building inspector with the insurance company for stairs in the upper walkway. It's going to be an electrical room, I think. So that's a necessity. The changing room doors appear to be from the original build of the building. Just 2 of those, I think, at $2,000 each. Just to make them look better, but also for, they're kind of rotting away at the side. We've had the windows, so it's these windows like you see here. There's been a phased-in approach over the last several years to replace sections of them, and it's over the far end. That was the last section to be replaced. It'd be good to go. Those are original installs, and some of them are a little loose and stuff. Staff can fix them to a certain extent. It'd be good. They're single pane, replacing them with double pane, I think, or gaseous. Yeah, so they're more energy efficient. That one, we'll have to look at for a safety issue. There is a potential that we could defer that a little bit, or defer that until the energy audit that we've discussed in the operating plan, which would give us some grant money on that. The $8,000 to replace the hydronic heat. So the heat pumps don't reach into that section of the building, I don't think, is that correct? And, oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies. So the 8,000, so when we say the VIC, we mean the old Minister's Island space that was down there. And if you've been in there, the big cost is there's a heater as you walk into the office. And so we didn't know if council wanted us to do anything in that space to ready it for future use for whomever. But you know, staff knows there should be a little bit of work done in there to prepare it for whatever the tenant is. So that would be the cost to do that. So the arena would be around 147,500. So we'll go to page 22. So going down really quick, the fire chief has asked for new headsets, specifically for the truck mobile system. Right now it's handheld equipment, and for safety reasons, it'd be better that they had proper handsets for a digital thing. For digital communications, I think there's 5 sets there, Terry, or 3? 5 sets for all the various trucks, so they can respond while attending a fire, and I suppose wear them while they're on the fire. The lounge furniture, basically it's material. We want to replace it with hard plastic or leather or faux leather couches and things, just for COVID issues and stuff. And then they need a replacement of a generator. I think that's on the truck, if I'm not mistaken. So that is due. It's something that they've had for years, and it's just the old one's given way. It's a piece of equipment they use at accident scenes. And I remember, I think it's primarily used for the Jaws of Life to power that up when required. The parking lot over there has been on our radar for several years. We've been putting it off, but please take a walk through there in the daylight and you'll see that it's in pretty bad shape. It's not even just cracking, it's falling apart. Originally, the fire chief asked to do it in 1 year. What we're saying is maybe we'll split it over 2 years, to either the front or the back of the building next year, and then do the other segment the year after. That would specifically be tied into our street resurfacing budget as well to get the best prices for it.
Does that need pulverized? Like, it's not bad? Yeah.
Almost everything there just removed right out as far as we can tell. There's nothing to be saved. It's the weight of the new trucks and stuff is probably more, and the age of it. It probably hasn't been touched since the 70s, not even with a better. And then backflow preventer. So the backflow preventer is probably failing in there, but it's part of our own bylaw. So I guess we should put, if we're going to follow our own bylaws, we better install that backflow preventer. It's as much a maintenance issue as a requirement. The courthouse and jail, we think we're supposed to do the painting this year, but when COVID struck, we put it back. But re-looking at it, we're having trouble getting prices. And the actual price to paint all 4 sides of that, plus the shield, is about $35,000. But we're hoping / counting on a 50% grant from the province Built Heritage Fund to cover that. So the town's cost put into that would only be half, so 17,500. The library is asked for a bilingual sign. It's really a requirement. What we've worked out is something that's, we've actually got it all designed. That's going to be on the front lawn area, 2-sided, I think. Maybe, depending on the cost, I guess. But it would set out, it wouldn't be on the building, and it just say like Ross Memorial Library, Bibliothèque Ross Memorial Library, I guess. It's something that really is requested by the province, and that would give something that's got a heritage feel and a nice touch to it, as opposed to just sticking up a normal sign. That would last for years and years. There's a storage shed behind the library that is shared with the museum that is falling apart, really falling apart. It can't be repaired, but our own staff can either buy a kit or buy materials and replace it. It holds some gardening materials and things that the staff there actually use. For the museum, the front steps off of Montague Street, the cement steps are in pretty rough shape, and we're looking at replacing them. Public Works did a repair job this year that went fairly well. And we might be able to extend that another year, but that will have to be replaced the next 2 to 3 years. We've also got a Built Heritage grant put out for that as well. The youth center has asked for the greenhouse to be replaced. They took an old building that someone donated to them, but it's got its problems. And I think the building was 10 or 15 years older, better when we inherited it, and they've had it for that long. So Debbie has asked that to be replaced. I think that's to be built internally, or a kit. it's a kit. The kits were as cheap as us buying the raw materials. The fence that surrounds the side of the youth center, so that's in between the youth center and the community garden, has been in pretty rough shape for the last several years, and it's rotted out now, so the whole fence should be pulled out and replaced with a picket style fence. And then Ms. Lord has asked to replace 4 chairs and a TV for $2,500.
Chris, can I interrupt just on the surveillance cameras?
Yeah.
We talked before about, well, we upgraded the surveillance cameras at the wharf and perhaps the need for surveillance cameras in the business district and other key points in town on different intersections, you know, coming and going, and how we might work with the RCMP and how that might help out our overall insurance and things like that. I'm just wondering if my interest, if we ever went forward with that at all, or
No, to be perfectly honest, we have an item within the registers for surveillance.
right?
There's kind of a bigger discussion because it's not just cost, but it's also perception of privacy issues that council has to let kind of staff kind of know. Right now, the type of camera systems that have been working okay for us are like the home security style. And so as long as they're inside in a fairly well-lit area, they're okay. And for the youth center, it'd be kind of placed in the common areas and then maybe on the outside just to see if anything's going on. It's over the years, we've had several surveillance cameras in the arena and the wharf. I think that's on Public Works. They might only get used 2 or 3 times a year. What I mean by that, they're under surveillance all the time, but where you need to look at it. Other times they're used, you know, like save a worker from having to go out, they hear a truck come in, they can look at it, or Tim Shark, if you hear something going on behind, you can have a look and see if it's like the garbage company or something coming along. So those systems overall seem to work pretty good. The wharf, because of the weather out there, we did invest in better quality systems, and that will be about the one that has the most use. We had some issues regarding vandalism this year, and they came in handy. We were able to identify the perpetrators easily because of that better system. But if council wants to invest in that, I will say that a good quality system, each camera is going to run you $7,000 to $10,000 for like something that's high pixel, what you need. That these home surveillance systems are good for catching movement and things. But like for you, Councillor, if you and your father were walking down the street on one of these low system cameras, they probably couldn't tell the difference between you because they're similar height and similar coloring and stuff. And so that's where the high resolution cameras become handy. But you significantly pay for that. So to do something along the front streets could be $100,000 if we want something that's more than just, you know, seeing something happen. If you want to be able to identify who did it, what happened, or whatever. And so,
Well, we've had a number of whodunits over the years where, you know, if we had cameras, it certainly would have helped out some mysterious things. And I also met with some surveillance people from St. John about how to perhaps do better surveillance on the trails, and the cameras weren't that much. I think they've come down considerably. So I'm just putting it out there that perhaps the town might want to look at some kind of comprehensive security surveillance that in a package where you could do everything. It would all be together in one system.
Yeah.
That seems to be the way they're going. And I think that's where I originally got the idea, was in Grand Bay at the playground there beside the arena. I was there for a run, and I see that they're all together under one surveillance system, under one company. They have signs, security provided by, and it's all, the whole town is, I know they have different, they would need as many cameras as us because they're linear, but it might be something we want to think about.
okay, staff will prepare a report and just to give a ballpark, but there are some
Fair enough.
questions. On page 24, under trails and sidewalks, that's primarily that project to upgrade Brandy Cove Road. I think that was over 500,000, Terry, or is it the 630, the whole Brandy Cove? The 630 is all of Brandy Cove Road. That is only to be completed if we get a grant at 70%. as
I
council.
thought that was for Prince of Wales.
No, there's two different things, correct? Yeah.
As I recall, there was a presentation, what, 2 or 3 weeks ago, identifying that as Prince of Wales.
No, so there's two different projects potentially on the go. So about a month and a half ago, council approved applications to Infrastructure Canada to do the Brandy Cove Road as part of the Coastal Link Trail System. So that's what that is. The Prince of Wales is included in another section of the report under storm sewers and the asphalting. That price is built in there to do that. Wharf renovations, that's the big wharf project that we're kind of working through the system with the federal government. The council can say yay or nay on it and have to determine what they're willing to live with as far as the appearance of it. And I'm still talking to the engineers. I haven't put it as a high priority, but we're going to have a rediscussion on that, how to get that traditional look. They have some ideas. Councillor Grue brought up a good point the last time, and I'd agree that really this project wouldn't start until 2021, late 2021 anyway. So the truth is half of it would probably be done before Christmas and then half of it after Christmas. So that project could be split between the 2 years easily. That'll take several months to do, and it's, you know, to avoid running into the tourist season, we're going to do it over the winter months, which shouldn't be a problem. Contractors are saying, yeah, that's, and we've done that before with other wharf projects. So, I mean, it's still, you know, our shares of $1.5 million over 2 years, but it would kind of delay some of the borrowing over that amount of time. Market Square refurbishment, we've talked about that, and there's a safety issue to some extent that there's not supposed to be traffic and stuff on the wooden boardwalks that are at the end that go along the, yep.
I can ask a question on this gate. Is this the same gate that we had questions from and issues from the users of the wharf?
Yeah.
So the question is, are we now suggesting that we're going to do this gate?
No.
So
It
why
was
do we
there,
have?
it's there in the initial draft. You know, remember this is
Okay.
about 3 or 4 weeks old as we're still waiting to hear what happened from after. So sorry, I didn't skip over it, meaning to try to avoid
No.
it. I just skipped over it thinking that's never going to happen, the truth be told.
Well, I think that's still a hot issue. It is for me,
Okay,
you know.
So-
You know, I think we proved that we needed to control traffic on the wharf, and that's how you do it in the modern world. It's just like security cameras. You have gates so that people have to only get access who are allowed to have access. Simple as that.
I thought the consensus of council was we were going to abandon that.
Well, if that's the consensus, yeah.
I don't recall voting on it.
I don't recall it either. So I think it stays in, and when we get down to taking it out, we'll have a vote.
It was directed by council to bring to the budget for discussion, no other motion or.
All right, thank you, Mr. Knock.
Thank you.
Okay. Question. The Market Square, I'm just a little confused. The 390,000 for Market Square refurbishment was in this year's budget. It was one of the stand down things, I believe, when we did the re-budget for COVID.
and that we didn't get any granting for it.
Right. But how does that factor into, because it seemed to me that, and I know we're going to be looking at a whole different methodology for if we go forward with the $5 million wharf project to change the way it looked, but it seemed to me that the two things were one and the same when we were anticipating putting in the stone, you know, the stone foundation. That would also shore up the part that we're showing up. Or am I getting this confused? It's two separate things, but I thought in the major project for $5 million, it was all part of the same project.
No, so the wharf itself is the 5 million.
Right,
The the Market Square is 390.
right,
It more or less is the same project, that it's to extend out where the owner of the anchor had put out his breakwater, is to
Right.
keep going. we go, no matter what, we continue that as far as at least behind Island Quest,
Okay,
and probably go out a little bit on the approach to the wharf. And if council decides to abandon the rock design that had been proposed, we'd end it there, but it would go along the whole face of it. And then if we find an alternate design that pleases council, we continue it from that point on.
but it's 5 million plus 390.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
There's been an issue raised, and I don't see it in here, with the patio stones in Market Square and in front of Town Hall, where it's the wrong kind of stone that was put in place. It's very slippery. It's a known health and safety risk. There's liability there for the town. I've been approached by one resident who fell and fractured 3 ribs, could have sued the town, but didn't. I've fallen there once. I think that we need to address that somehow. And it's just an accident waiting to happen. And we could have somebody that's seriously injured there over an issue that we know about. And I would suggest that we should have remedied quite some time ago. So I don't know where that fits in the budget here, if that's part of the 390 or not.
It is not.
So I think we need to have a line item for that particular issue as a health and safety item.
We'll bring it under, we've done the costing, and I guess we had a discussion about this a little while ago, but one of the questions is, I'm just trying to remember now, all of Water Street has to be done in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yep.
And if we do it now, we're gonna have to redo it back then. And it might be an item to defer until then. Public Works does their best salting and sanding and to avoid the falls and things. But we'll bring the cost analysis back to council for your review and just sort of what our long-term approach is on it.
Yeah, but for the purpose of the minutes, Mr. Nopper, I'd like it identified that I've raised this issue as a health and safety risk, and it's a liability issue. And I think that it needs to be identified that it's a known issue, and that, you know, if we choose to defer it, then that's at the peril of you know, the town. Is there is an issue there, and we have had an injury, and I think that we need to do something. So if that could be noted in the minutes somehow, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
And Mr. Spear, could we will get at some point an assessment of what kind of cost would be involved to do that, and then we can have a further discussion of that at committee or whatever.
Is it an authorized material to use in that situation, or is it a not authorized? Like, I understand that you're saying it's slippery, but like, if it's something that's not correct, it's different than if it's something that, in Councillor Gru's opinion, is, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between an opinion and something that isn't the correct material.
It was approved in the day, and the day was a long time ago, prior to the.
If we're gonna start talking about back in the day, perhaps Councillor Ackley would have been on that council when they first put in.
No.
Before my
We're
time.
talking the rehabilitation of the downtowns. We're
I
talking the
wasn't here
90s.
all that time.
You owe Councillor Akaji an apology.
I'm sorry. I do remember that there were councillors at the time complaining about the look of the brick, calling it Red Square, way back when.
Right.
So I'm sure that
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
perhaps not the best material, but it would have been an improved material because it was contentious at the time. And I'm sure some of those people who complained about it then are still complaining about it now.
Perhaps, Mr. Spear, it might be a good first step to do a health and safety analysis of that brick, to determine, as was asked here, is it the appropriate brick that should be there? And in fact, ascertain what is the risk from a health and safety perspective, and what measures should be taken. Because we may find that a consultant comes in and says, okay, Market Square has to be cordoned off because that brick is unsafe, presents a risk. That may be a result of that. All I know is that there have been slips, there has been falls, and anybody here who's walked on that brick when it's wet or it's icy, knows that there's an issue there.
Well, there's an issue everywhere you go when it's wet and it's icy.
No, not necessarily.
The
That's not
CEO
true.
said that in the next few years, they were looking at redoing the whole front street, as suggested probably done at that time.
This is the same brick though that's used in a lot of other municipalities too. Like St. John's got a pile of it, do they not? Like, we're not the only ones that have this brick. I'm not saying there's not risk with anywhere. There's risk on curbs. There's risk on everything.
There's different styles of brick. I can't comment because I don't know what the suitability of that brick was that they used back then for walking. I understand Councillor Drew's concerns, but I guess we'll present a report, maybe even for Monday's night's discussion or something, just to see. But I'd like all the council's input because the health and safety report's going to cost a little bit to do. You know, it's probably between $5,000 and $10,000.
Well, I don't think it'll cost that much to get somebody to
I'm sure.
look at the brick
Well,
and say,
So come and suggest we close down all sorts of things.
Well, and I guess it's just if we,
Not us.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not the responsible thing to do, but if it's identified as a hazard, then you have no choice but to close it off or do it. So,
And I think
Just so you're aware.
it's true to say, if we decide to go down this road and we start fixing brick, that means we have to fix all of it. And there's a ton of it, as Councillor Gumichel says, all over the town in different places. And if it's all the same stuff, then it's all the same risk. It could be millions of dollars.
so we'll work with someone to identify the cost of, well, we've already identified the cost in-house with experience we have, because we've had people replace some of the brick for other stuff, but the suitability of it is a different question. I'll touch base with some consultants soon to find out what it's going to cost to do that and report back to council. The Wellness Center equipment is just additional equipment to go for office furniture and things that weren't included as part of the construction cost. The original plan a year ago was to bring a lot of the items that's in the existing office over here and reuse it for a time being, but it may be in everyone's best interest just to do it. If we're going to have a new facility, it'd be nice to have a whole bunch of new furniture in there too, to start fresh, start new. Most of the items that are over there are circa 1970, to be perfectly honest, except for a few new chairs we bought that will find their way over. But that's what that is for. But I will have to report to council too, though, that the fitness center RFP closed last week with no submissions. So I'm going to follow 2 or 3 other avenues and start calling people direct to see if we can generate some revenue. We followed the procurement cycle of things responsibly with no submissions. So now I'm going to see if we can find partners that'll work with us directly instead of through that process. So that could be changed, or at least you'll have to consider that in further deliberations as we move along, if you want that side of the facility opened right away. And then the age-friendly community has a report. They'd like to spend $10,000 just on more equipment, just in minor things throughout the town. This year, they installed benches along the Van Horn Trail, and Terry Acton and I were out looking at something just along the trail by one of the benches, and somebody stopped us and just thanked us over and over what a fantastic addition it was. So, you know, I think $10,000 a minor investment for, you know, what it's doing for people. That system is probably one of the most widely used recreational assets in the town.
Right.
So anything we can do to supplement that and make it a better experience for everybody, I think is worthwhile.
And I think that there is a there is a checklist that in order to keep our status, we need to continue to do some things all the time. I don't think we need to have a gap. We don't have to spend $1 million, but we need to keep doing things that contribute to us keeping our status as well. Okay.
Okay, so that's, it was about 23 minutes to get through the whole list, Your Worship. I'll just speak really quickly about what the funding model is right now, regardless of what council, well, I shouldn't say it that way, but right now with the 1 cent tax increase and services about where they're at, there's about $800,000 in tax revenue available to be used in capital purchase. we have about $129,000 in gas tax funding that, unless unforeseen top-up comes this year from the government, it's already been promised. One of the big things, we do have a lot of money from partners, which are basically government grants and agencies, of pretty near $4.2 million. And, but as Councillor Grew's brought up, right now, this shows a $1.6 million new debt. Primarily, a lot of it's based because of the big wharf project that we're undertaking. And then reserve fund transfers of $500,000 to help pay all that. Just to note, we had in the budget for this current year $475,000 worth of reserve fund transfers that we haven't used or aren't going to have to use because of scuttled projects because of COVID. So it's really just a carryover of that from this year's budget to next year's.
Okay. All right. And again, many of these projects, I assume, are projects that we're not going to continue with if we do not get the significant federal and provincial funding that we have been led to believe we might still get.
We'd be unable to continue with it, in my
Right,
opinion. Your
right.
worship.
So that means our share of those projects is saved this year because we're not going to get the funding that if we don't get it, sort of thing. And that's still, notwithstanding the recent election and now the change of cabinet ministers, that just puts it further down the road till we get new cabinet ministers that are responsible. We have a new person responsible for economic development. The person that you and I talked to is gone and they're nowhere to be seen. We also don't have a cabinet member in all of our region now, not one that sits on the cabinet. That could cause us problems in terms of getting federal, provincial. So it seems to me it's a long shot for some of these projects to get federal, provincial funding for 2021. That just we should keep that in mind when we start deciding what we can afford.
Your worship,
Yeah, go
one
ahead.
thing that I think would help in our analysis as we move forward is Mr. Spear indicated that the large project, the $5 million project for the wharf, would be spread over 2 years. That will have a significant impact on the level of borrowing, long-term debt that we're going to incur. From my reckoning, it would reduce that by about $700,000, which brings it more into the realm of manageable and not so far-fetched there. The other thing that I would urge staff to have a look at is when you look at the total for our capital program over the 5 years, it appears to be front-end loaded, where we have 7 million the first year and then it goes down to 2, then 1, and then 2. And I think there may be an opportunity there to do some resource leveling and spread out some of the projects so that we can have a more even distribution of the work, so that it's from a debt management point and a capacity point of view of what we can do. And then that becomes even more, I guess, obvious when you look at the new long-term debt field, is where we're looking at incurring 1.6 million in 2021, 460,000 in 2022, nothing in 2023, 381 in 2024, and nothing in 2025. So again, just spreading that out over the years, again, we could accomplish the same objectives over the 5 years, but just spreading out the projects and doing a bit of resource leveling would do wonders, I think, for the program.
Just important to note, though, I don't think that any of us think that there's not going to be stuff that gets added in.
Absolutely. There will be stuff added in, but at the same time, that resource leveling component is important. And I think your point is well taken, that if there's stuff added in, the debt numbers we're looking at right now are somewhat skewed. So we have to keep that in mind as we look at these numbers.
Council Brew, if we divide that wharf contribution, is that half the 3.6 or half of 1.5?
Well, if you look at the difference between 5 and 3.6 is 1.4 million. So that's the town cost. So half of that, 700,000
We'll go to 2022.
would go to 2022.
I appreciate what Councillor Grew's saying, and we're okay with that. The thing is that some of the reasons that you have big years and small years is because we have
In terms of capital expenditures. And again, that's sort of an easy way to spread out the expenditures so that, you know, we're at least having a consistent approach year to year to year.
Didn't we just get a new truck?
There we go.
3 years ago, Terry, I think.
3 already?
Time flies, eh? Yeah, no.
I'll say, Councillor, what we get caught in is a couple of things is that past councils may not have reinvested as quickly as they should have. And so sometimes you're playing a little bit of catch up. Or with the fire department, they might have had, remembering that it was supported by an endowment fund for many years, they might have bought 2 trucks on top of each other in a relatively short time, like say 5 or 6 years. And so I won't say you're caught, but then when we buy them, do like that early on, they have to be replaced around the same time down the road. But the fire department, and one thing that's really helped us, of course, is, as you know, is we've got a full-time mechanic as part of our public works crew now. So certainly they're getting a lot of good care, getting them down and having them inspected, and that's all our fleet. The, you know, stuff that might have been put off because it had to go to a private garage is now being looked at ahead of time.
We're also talking about this next vehicle being something that we do not now have. It's not a replacement vehicle. It's either a ladder truck or a platform vehicle. The other thing about deferring it, if we can safely do that, is it gives more time to try to come to fruition a partnership where we might be able to share this with other jurisdictions, as we haven't moved ahead with the regional fire service concept as much as what I'd hoped that we would do when the Regional Service Commission legislation was put in place. But there still is some appetite for that because St. Stephen doesn't have a platform or ladder truck at this point in time because the Calais one was decommissioned and they don't have one either over there. And so maybe there are some ways that if that has to happen, or at least the spreading it over 2 years, makes sense to me as a non-accountant, that makes our debt borrowing look better this year if we put the 2 years, if we can possibly do that without compromising the safety issues of having, because again, this is a brand new piece of equipment that we don't now have at all, right?
Well, and your worship, right now in the budget, it's only accounting for a replacement truck. If you want to see the reality of a platform truck, it'll be double that cost, and we can certainly can put it in for your deliberation,
Right.
or for consideration of the time. But it's about a $1.4 to $1.5 million piece of equipment.
Right.
Well, really, for all intents and purposes, everything past 2021 is the next council.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
So
You
we
know,
hope.
so we hope. But the other thing, and I'm just going to mention this in the back of at least my mind, I'm looking at this budget and saying, okay, how is municipal reform going to impact on all of this? Because I think we all know something is coming,
Can't predict that.
but we
though.
can't predict it.
We just got to go with status quo. Like,
Exactly.
And that, yeah, I'd agree. It's at the back of my mind, but I'm thinking it'll be the next council who
Next
see the
council.
ramifications of it.
That may be coming sooner rather than later, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we need to put our 5-year budget in place
Yep.
as while we're here, and then the next
Control.
people can worry about whether it was good or bad.
Control, you can control.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Mr. Spear. What's next?
Okay, so there's the long-term debt analysis on the next page. It's long and complicated. I can go through it if you like, or I can skip to the bottom, I guess. Maybe just to do the very highlights. And so I devised this, before Emily had to follow up on it, and I think she cried herself to sleep some nights just because of the system, but it works well. And it's, I think, you know, brought forward by Councillor Grew a couple of years ago just to have a good hard look in it. And so it's good for councils to understand. So if you go way down, you see a big box that has total budget, debt servicing, and we'll just go through that really quick. If council wants a better description of everything above, let me know. But essentially, everything that's in the capital for borrowing is brought over here, plus our current debt. So it comes up with the debt servicing level year by year. The good thing about this is if we change things, this sheet will be updated automatically, so it's not a big deal to fix that. So at the end of 2019, a debt servicing level, which is a combination of long-term interest and long-term principal payments, was at 5.81 of the total budget. In 2020, just because of the combination of debt being retired and some of our projects being postponed, and the debentures not being taken until late in the year, it actually falls to 4.78%. But then in 2021, 5.82, and then 2022, 8.15. Now, one thing council should understand just in this calculation, that when you do the loans, the payments and things actually don't come out to the next year. It's not being shown in the current year. It's just the natural, because you don't take out the long-term debt to the end of the project year. And so that's why it takes such a big jump in 2022. It's actually financing the 2021 budgets. And between 2023 and 2025, it actually holds its own as we require less debt and more loans are being paid off. And so again, this budget isn't ideal as far as Councillor Grew likes to say, and the mayor and the deputy mayors, we got millions and millions of dollars worth of stuff we could do in roads, sidewalks, we got this infrastructure deficit. But staff kind of looked at what was the main items, added in some things that we thought council would be interested in, like the walking trail along Prince of Wales, and maintained a certain level of debt and recapitalization, basically the total capital purchases to come up with a figure that we thought at a tax rate that council would be favorable towards. It appears, well, not appears, we are more than doubling our debt load because our assessment and stuffs are assumed to go up. So when you see it go up from 5 to 8, it's not shown here, but if you ever go to 10, it's actually your budgets are growing every year because of the increase in assessment. But again, 10% is about normal for most municipalities. St. Andrews is a little light, so I think this is very feasible, but it's really a gut check for council to determine how much debt they're willing to incur on any particular project. So, Your Worship, do you want to jump to the utility department, or would you like, Councillor, things I can't say.
Your Worship?
Yes, sir.
I have two comments. Number one is thank you very much for this debt analysis. It's very, very helpful for council, I think. It would be very useful if we had a similar analysis for the reserve funds.
Sorry.
For the reserve funds.
Yep.
So if you could have a sheet like this for reserve funds, it would help us.
Yeah, it actually should have been on your table tonight, I think, council.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you. And then the other question I have, or issue, before we move to the utility fund, is I think the council, perhaps we should have a discussion of what is our tolerance and where do we stand as a council with regards to how much of an increase are we comfortable having our taxpayers pay? Because there's two elements to the amount that the taxpayer pays. One is the assessed value, which is going up and up and up. The other one is the mill rate, which we have here going up and up and up. And when you combine the two, it makes for a pretty nasty increase in the amount that the taxpayer at the end of the day pays. And my discussions with the assessors, the property assessment branch of the New Brunswick government indicates that St. Andrews has had an average increase of 5% in assessed values last year, this year, and is forecast for next year. So that's 15% over 3 years. And if you look over the same period of time, we've increased the mill rate by what, 6 cents or something, which is 5
over
cents?
2 years, last 2
Over
years.
3 years.
Over 3 years,
Yeah.
7, I think.
7. So which is about 5%. So if you look at the 15% increases, and these are all compounded, with the increase in mill rate, that's a 20% increase in 3 years in the amount that the average taxpayer is paying. I think that is pretty high, and if we look down the road, and this is a 5-year plan, it's not too hard to see that this could approach 30 or 40%, and that will drive people out of town, and it really will have a negative impact on what we want to do. So I'm sort of looking at this and saying, okay, is there some way that we can, as a town, say, okay, we'd like the amount that the taxpayer pays actually to be no more than 3% more than the previous year. And if that means that our mill rate goes down because the assessment has gone up by 5% or 6% or more, then I think that's something that we can do for our taxpayers. So I think what we have to do is in my opinion, is look at the taxpayer as there is only one taxpayer, and try and sort of manage how much that taxpayer actually pays, rather than just sort of focus on a mill rate in isolation.
I understand what you're saying. I'm having trouble understanding your one statement that over that period of time, everybody's taxes went up 20%. Is that accurate? Is that actually what happened?
You had 3.5% growth just from the assessment value every year over the 5 years.
Right.
That's a large percentage of growth.
That's a big percentage.
And then we've upped the mill rate on top of it, is to Councillor Gru's point. I think if you look at our growth rate of what we wanted to grow the tax base, the town of St. Andrews, we have over-delivered our goal, mainly through the government, through the assessment, but through the mill rate as well.
Yeah.
We've certainly made up for a number of the years in which we held it steady when we should have taken gradual increases to keep up with asset management. But of course, it wasn't a common topic back then. So they just looked at what they needed year to year at that point.
I'm not questioning it. I am questioning it, but I'm not against it. I think if we could get to a number that we're all comfortable with in terms of, but my point is we are catching up on a lot of things that just weren't done for many, many years in the past. They just weren't done. And I'm not criticizing anybody. The circumstances were different. I mean, I think about the 2 years that the Algonquin was completely closed and there was no economic benefit coming from there at all, right? And then even before that, there were not good years, but we've been riding the wave of 4 or 5 good years of activity until we hit COVID. And you're right, nobody cares, Deputy Mayor, I've realized that over the years, that nobody cares for the excuse to say, I'm sorry, don't talk to me about your assessment because that's what the provincial government does. They don't care about that.
They just
it
see it
should
go
be
up.
us doing the assessment, and it should be us justifying the assessment, right? So I'm not trying to get out of that, but how do we put this into something that allows us to do some of what we think we have to do for our community? That's the balance. Mr. Spear, you had a comment?
Well, Your Worship, if you look, council looks put on your desk tonight too before the meeting was at the Deputy Mayor's request was a property assessment history for the town.
This is great, by the way. Thank you for this.
And if you look at it, the growth is the big year is 2018, and top of my head, I think we also did a 3-cent tax increase that year. So there's a growth of 5.83 and possibly a 3-cent tax increase. So people would have been paying 7 or 8%. And last year it was only 3.38%. I understand what Councillor Gru's saying, but I think it's anecdotally along certain properties in certain parts of the town. And so I'm not sure if we have enough data to be able to say that every taxpayer in town is going up that much. But the problem is those, and let's be honest, it's in the Platte, especially along Water Street and surrounding area. Yeah, their property values are escalating at a really quick rate. And so it's the higher end houses, if you will, but like the subdivision and probably along here like Thomas Avenue and stuff, isn't?
And there were some, and I know this quite well now already. I think 2018 was the year that the 15 million plus building called Anchor's Landing came on for taxes, correct?
17, and it was assessed at. If you look under that, the whole assessment that year went by 6.6 million.
Yeah.
Now, there might be stuff goes down, but even if the project was 15 million, you know. the
No,
assessment's a little different
not
thing,
the
but
assessment.
Yes, but that was one
but
big
it was-
increase.
That would be a big chunk because we're
Absolutely.
talking about 36 residences that came on
Yeah.
and are paying indirectly taxes in one big building, right? And so that doesn't happen every year, hasn't happened since. And so we still are in that progression. That's what I guess I'm trying to look at. If you own a $250,000 house, how much of your taxes gone up exactly in that period of time that we're studying? That's what I want to know, so that we know what kind of a reaction we get from that person whose taxes are on a $250,000
Like I
house.
was saying, Your Worship, it depends. That someone, you know, let's say along Water Street on the water side, they might have actually seen 20% increase over the last 3 to 4 years, while someone more central, say at Montague Street, might have seen only a 2 to 3% increase per year, something or less. It'd have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And actually, we did some study of that. We talked, and I didn't bring it forward, I guess, but we did some study about random properties in town. And I remember, we'll bring that just to your attention, and we'll do like 20 or 30 properties, say this is what, because you can even go on the SNB assessment system and see for yourself.
Right. The other thing that I would just put forward is that my impression, again anecdotally, is that many of the big increases in tax assessment happened because somebody moved here from Calgary and bought a $175,000 house and paid $300,000 for it and got a bargain because they got $600 for their bungalow in Calgary, right? That's where, and then guess what the assessment was? It turned out to be 300,000 because that's an easy assessment for an assessor to make. He said, that's the new market value because that house just sold for that amount of money, right? And so, you know, some of it skews it. It really does skew it because the system is not a system that they operate. And so the roving bands of tax assessors that Councillor Brew ran into, there's no systematic way that they do taxes, in my opinion, or nothing. No one in the provincial government has ever been able to explain to me what the rational system is of assessing everybody's property value, and why, when someone from out of town pays too much for a house, the little old lady who lives across the road has a different market value for her house, even though she's lived there for 40 years, right? It's that her house is all of a sudden worth more.
I guess my point, Your Worship, is that you can't look at the mill rate in isolation. You have to look at the assessed value at the same time.
Yeah.
And just looking at the numbers provided by the CAO, and I just did a rough calculation, over the last 5 years, you're seeing a growth of 11 to 12% in the assessed value. And during the same period, our mill rate has gone from what, $1.16 to $1.26,
Yep.
which is about another 10%. So when you add those two together, that's the taxpayer is seeing a 20% increase
Over a
in
period
the
of time.
amount that they pay out. They don't care if it's assessed value or if it's mill rate.
No.
It's
I
my
certainly-
taxes are this.
No, I agree with that. I think it's time has passed now for us to play the game that we don't do the assessments. It's not our fault that your assessment went up. Nobody cares about that. It should be our fault if our assessment goes up. I agree with what you're saying. I just want to get us to a number where we're not backsliding and we're not sending a message that we don't need to continue to raise more money in our community in order to do all of the things that our staff are telling us we need to do in order to keep ahead of asset depreciation and to make things the way we want them in our community, so that people will continue to want to, people are moving here and paying too much for houses because of the way our community is and what we offer here. That's my view. And if we stop doing that, we're going to go back where we did before.
So when do we get the actual the assessment growth rate for next year? When do we know?
Supposed to give it to us by mid-October is what they're announcing.
It's really hard to lock in our mill rate without knowing
Right.
that.
But I do like the notion of saying, is it 3%? I don't know. Maybe that's what we'll agree on, and we'll figure out what the combination of assessed value and mill rate is to get 3%, if that's what council decides. But I'm against reducing it, and I'm against flatlining it because I think it sends the wrong message to the community.
And Your Worship, if I may, just as devil's advocate, I think we have to realize too that, yeah, the mill rate's important and you can't price people out of the town. You can't bankrupt people. I understand all that. But the investments we've made the last few years are in resources, staff, services, recapitalization, things like that. So if you stop that, something will suffer, just
Right.
so we understand. And, you know, in council, I know that was your plan in the first few years, your mandate was we've got to play a little bit of catch up. There's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do. There's additional services we have to do. Like this budget's rich in a couple of things off the top of my head. You know, the Prince of Wales project was just something we thought council would like to do. It's a very common walk-in area, as everyone knows. But we already told you that could be deferred or not done at all for a few more years.
I know we're gonna get into line by line, but if we don't have partners to play, I think we should defer that if it doesn't have to be done today. Like,
Right.
it's, like, if we're taking this amount of debt in, the
Yeah.
nice to haves can't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I just have, now we're talking about that, I have one question, and probably Terry can answer, you can, Chris, but Terry might want to chime in on this one too, is that it seems to me that the water and sewer recommendations for Prince of Wales are to build a platform on which we can then widen the street and make the walking part of it. And so if you don't do that, then you can't do the walk. It's a multi-year thing, and so it all gets to be deferred. So that's essentially two big parts of the project that would get further deferred if we decided not to do it at all. There's no sense doing the water and sewer unless the water and sewer can't be deferred because of its condition. Is that sort of a somewhat of an assessment of where?
Your assessment is correct, Your Worship, that the Prince of Wales is within the 5-year window of having to be replaced. But early on in the summer, we talked about, you know, this council have
Yeah.
different things.
Oh,
And
no.
trails and sidewalks have been a big part of it. So
Yeah.
we brought that to council for your consideration
Makes
during the
sense.
budget process.
So both parts of that process can be deferred and we don't have to deal with it this
Yeah,
year.
and
And
just
it's
so
not
you
us.
know, there was a question asked at the last budget meeting, it was at the total project cost over 2 years, if we went ahead, was about $1.1 million.
Right.
That's excluding the things in the ground. That's just stormwater and widening the road.
Right,
The water mains and sanitary sewer mains would be on top of that.
right. So it's a pretty big project but it's not essential to start that project this year. So no one's going to suffer or notice particularly. Okay.
But getting back to the discussion on assessed value and mill rate, I would be quite comfortable if we adopted a policy that, you know, the combination of assessed value and mill rate increased at a rate equal to the cost of living index or something, or a fixed percentage of, say, 2 or 3%. Something along those lines that made sense.
I don't think we need to get in any policies. It's our last budget. Let the next
Yep.
council just set what we want and let them figure out what they want. Cause that'd be our policy, and they're gonna be a new council and they can decide what they're comfortable with.
But we're setting the mill rates for the next 5 years here.
We're not.
We're not, but
We're
the
not.
next council, we're making recommendations for the
Yeah.
next 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why sorry, Councilor Commissioner.
It seems to me last time we had this discussion about mill rate and taxes, I asked if we could put together a mock-up of kind of some examples or where you played it out. I can't think of the word right now. Like place on Water Street versus, you know, actually show us where taxes were going up.
You're wondering, say a house that's 200,000, a house that's 300,000, a house that's 400,000, the impacts?
Location was another key that the CAO brought up. So
Right.
without saying it's Joe Blow's house, just like, I can't think of the word, but like a sample,
Scenario.
yeah, like a scenario thing that showed 2 or 3 things, and then it would kind of inform our decision about where to set the phone rate. I can't think of it. Actually use real numbers without the name.
I can, but I guess, and this is all fine and dandy, and we have no problem doing that. It's easy enough to do. The data is easily available online to anybody to do it under the SNB assessment program. You can go into St. Andrews and see the last 5 years assessments on any property without any passwords or anything. But without doing a whole sale analysis of the whole town, you know, just picking and choosing certain properties, some will look like scare the bejeepers out of you, and others, you know, we can do a sample and say, well, we'll do, I don't know, like 10 properties on Water Street, 10 properties in Queen Street or something, just show you. But again, as you know, even in the plat, it's not like I don't know, like a subdivision in another town where all the houses are just cookie cutters of each other. Even in our town throughout, all the houses vary in size, architecture, and style, which has a huge difference. But we can bring all that to you, and just so you get an idea, it'd be easy for staff to do that. We can probably have it in your hands by the end of the week.
The assessors, they tend to look at the average values going up and for certain dollar range values, like houses under 200,000 are going up at this rate. Houses from 2 to 400 are going at this rate. Houses from 400 to $1 million are going up at this rate. And that probably is more indicative, because then you don't have to look at the style of house or anything. It's just the range or the value of the house.
But you were saying that some houses went up by 20% over 4 years, and he's saying that that's not true all over the town. So I thought, case study, that's a case study. If we had some samples, with it, just block out the name, and then we could actually see that in action. Case study.
I'm seeing that in the budget document before us. It's 2% growth is what we're looking for in our tax base. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in discussions last year, 2 years ago, council just said that's 5 cents, and we just kind of agreed 2 cents plus 2% growth, 3%, 3 cents on the tax rate, just as a discussion in future years.
So for this exercise, it's 2% growth, correct, on a revenue side for tax base?
2% just on the assessment, and so there's also increases each year in the tax mill rate. So it should be 5% combined.
Right. That was what we agreed to. But if the assessed value is going up 4%, then we only need 1 more percent. But then the percent is not exactly a cent, right?
But,
1%
and that's the way to look at it. I mean,
Yeah.
the deputy mayor said, well, we need that figure, but there's not going to be that big of a jump unless we jump from 2% to 40%, and that's a big scary figure. But 2 to 3 or 4% isn't going to adjust the budget all that much. Really, we're talking, on a $5 million budget, 3 cents is $90,000.
Right.
It's a significant amount of money, but it's on a $5 million budget. It's not going to have it's not going to make or change any wide decisions of council. It'll just be fine tuning at that point.
But the 3 cents to a senior on a fixed income can make a huge difference.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's my concern, is they get nailed with an increased assessed value, and then the 3% from the or 3 cents from the town, and wham, that could be the difference between.
So we'll do our analysis. The only thing I'll remind council and anyone who's listening is, under the Local Governments Act, you can't make adjustments to property taxes on a per person basis or
No, you
anything.
can't.
It's just a gross thing. So people were saying, well, why don't you install your own seniors rebate program in St. Andrews? We're legally not entitled to. That has to be through the finance department. And they did have something like that a few years ago, and could possibly do it again. I'm not sure, but just so everyone that's listening is clear on that fact.
But again, that's part of the bigger issue that we may or may not, any of us, be around here to deal with. But the bigger issue is municipal responsibility for tax assessment, which then could include us doing those kinds of things. In other words, if you earn this much money and less, then we're going to freeze your mill rate, whereas everybody else's is going to go up 2 cents, right? Because you qualify to get consideration from the town because your assessment went up, but your property's not worth any more than it was before your assessment went up, because you don't plan on going anywhere as long as you can afford to stay there, right? It's not, you're not speculating like you didn't make any profit on your property.
So the last 4 years, the lowest growth that we've had is 2.76% on assessment. Is that correct, between new construction and higher assessment?
Correct.
I think, so we have 2% set in this.
2% of the budget, yeah.
I think we should change that to 2.76%, because that's been the lowest over the last 4 years, and hope that we get it. And I actually propose that we put the mill rate the same as this past year. We've been very aggressive on both, and see where that brings in for numbers.
About the Trump radio system is that we're being punished by the provincial government for being successful. In other words, we're subsidizing other places because we have a healthy tax rate increase here. We're being asked to pay more than other people are for the same service. So maybe it's time we did say we're not going to punish we're not going to pass the punishment on to our citizens by raising their mill rate this year. And if they don't like it in Fredericton, maybe they could pay attention to the fact that we don't think we're getting a fair shake here when it comes to
Over the
their
last 4
policies.
years, we've consistently grown our tax base.
Right.
And we get rewarded by getting bigger charges.
Right.
Yeah,
And we get no equalization payment, and they get $1.3 million over in St. Stephen, and they pay less for the trunk radio system per capita than we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, folks, you won't get an argument from me if that's what you decide to do. Not that it's my point to argue. but-
I'm just one view at this table, but if there's
no,
consensus.
No,
no, I would agree with the deputy mayor. Let's freeze the mill rate, give people a break.
Yep.
And we can reflect that in our budget document.
And I think 2.76.
Go out on a positive note.
2.76% growth would be a pretty conservative estimate
Yeah.
too. I know you're going to 1 decimal point to 2.8, I guess.
I was gonna say, why don't we really well and say 3%?
Because
Well, the-
I like it.
I'm just picking the lowest number of the last 4 years. I'm being conservative. Anything else will help pay back some debt.
well, the average
Give me
growth,
0.3, 3%. Let's make it simple. Keep it.
well, that's still conservative. The average annual growth has been
I know.
3.53%.
So let's go 3% and no mill rate increase.
So, yeah,
Sounds
There's a 75% chance you're right.
Council, what about future years? I know we'd like this reflective of your, it's just, I mean, again, we understand that council may not be this composition in a year's time, but what would you like your future years just to look like if you're going to present this as a public document?
Well, if we're seeing a 3% growth rate in the assessed values and more, then I don't think there's any reason to raise the mill rate. Because,
I'd go a penny a year just to show that they should
Yeah.
continue. We don't want to get in the habit of holding it 10 years. Not that they
No,
will
no,
not
no.
look at it, but just show they should continue to do it. So 1 or 2 cents should be in that every year. And then they can decide year to year based on what that is.
Okay, so we've, if we do it that way, then we've lowered it from the 2 cents that we've put on for the last few years in our administration, right? Now we're going to lower it to 1 plus 3%.
Correct. I think we've got to assume that this trend will continue. It's a attractive community to invest in and buy houses, maybe overpriced, but it's an attractive community
Well,
to
some are.
purchase.
So I'm hearing that you'd like in future years to be just, I heard the 3% we would read on just a penny in the mill rate each year.
Yep.
I think that's a more realistic growth rate to get there
Just
based
so
on
you
what
know,
we're seeing.
council, though, that is, as you see in our current plan, there's $1.39 for a mill rate. That is going to have some consequential effects on staff. Will have to do some cutting in future years probably to manage that, which we're fine with. But most of the projects going out were all related to asset management planning. There wasn't very much there for niceties. Just so you're aware.
For sure. And we got to be realistic that we set the mill rate the last few years by using this model, and every year we're debating it. So they're going to do the same thing year to year.
Right.
yeah,
Like,
Yeah. It's a plan, not
it's a plan.
not a firm budget. Is that workable, everybody? You think?
That's going to have a huge impact because the mill rate goes from the forecast of $1.39 to $1.31.
35 or $1.34. We work.
$1.31,
but the growth will help
Well, no, we're
offset
saying a
that.
penny each year, right?
right? So you go from 126 this year
Yeah.
in 2021, and you add a penny each year,
Yeah, $1.30.
$1.30. You're losing 9 cents.
So that's, yeah, well, that's about $250,000. Well, close to
What do you
$300,000
mean?
lost tax revenue with.
Yeah.
And that's 1 year, so it'll be cumulatively about $1 million worth of tax revenue lost.
Yeah, but
cumulatively over 4 years.
we're not losing what we have now. We're sustaining what we have now, and we're losing the potential for a greater increase in the
Yeah.
future, right?
To your point, I guess it's about $42,000 extra we're adding in the growth from the assessments, but that's not going to offset the 3 cents. Is it? So that's about 90,000.
On just round
Sorry,
numbers, on a
it's two-
$300 million assessment base, 3 cents is about $90,000.
So we're doing 1 cent. So it's a 2 cent difference. So that's around 60,000. 42 is what we're showing gross. So we're about off 18,000 extra a year is what it'll be.
Right.
Roughly. Because every cent's 30,000, right? but we've changed our growth rate from 2% to 3%, which is around an extra $42,000 a year just by doing our growth rate higher.
Right.
Do you get that? So right now we're only doing a growth rate of 2%. If we up to 3%, it's an extra 42,000 revenue in the budget.
Right.
Right.
And then if we take 2 cents off the mill rate from 3 cents to 1 cent, that's
Right.
60,000. So we're roughly off about 18,000 in our
Yeah.
plan over every year.
So it's manageable for us to work through. It's not a big,
I'm an accountant.
But you're,
You're more than welcome to join the fund.
I got a meeting that day.
Yeah.
anyway, I know
It's
that.
certainly council, it's, I think staff and council have enjoyed the extra revenue, if you will. We've put it to good use and stuff, but there's other communities all over New Brunswick that are struggling to figure out how to keep the lights on, to be honest.
Right.
And staff are being lost, so
Well-
certainly staff can go through, but we will make you aware what we're cutting. We'll go through and let you know the overall effect.
Right.
But
And
I'll reiterate that I don't think council's been irresponsible in raising it, that the money's being put to good use.
no, we had to
Yeah.
catch up for sure. And we didn't know what our asset management plan was going to say. It also puts us in a little bit better position too. I think when we start lobbying again for federal and provincial cost sharing for some of the things that we need to do, right? And I, for one, am getting tired of penalizing our taxpayers. I agree with Councillor Drew on this, penalizing our taxpayers so we can give more money to the provincial government. And pay more for things that, pay more than other people do for the same services, right? I mean, I'm totally incensed about this trunk radio thing, as you guys have probably noticed, and the way in which it was done, and we're stuck. We're gonna have to pass this on Monday night, I believe, because we have no option, and people won't be getting, 911s won't be called out if we don't have this system in place soon. Anyway.
And just to confirm, Your Worship, and maybe that the Prince of Wales widening is now off the table. You'd like us to remove that from the budget, is that correct? And I guess we have 2 out of 4 councillors agreeing.
Yep.
You get a nod from,
Yeah.
I know Councillor Gubish will never shake his head to that.
Unfortunately.
He's outvoted, so we'll say 3-1.
The Terry Fox walk with each class on
Yeah.
East Wales Street, so come see how that works.
Okay, good.
Been there, done that.
Well, it's a deferral, it's not an elimination, because
Deferral,
that's an important project down the road. I hope somebody else thinks that is an important project eventually.
Oh, it certainly is. But that isn't the only one I think that we could cut off that list.
Right.
So
there's
I don't know if it's tonight's the night that we do. Remember that exercise we always do the scrub? We've done it the last 2 years where it's yes, no. We've done it and we usually knock off a few.
Well, as you know, Deputy Mayor, we're trying to make this faster, so
Yeah.
if you have, I think there's discussion and staff knew very well there's stuff there that was probably going to have to be bumped, but we introduced things to you just to bring them forward. So if council can give us more direction and stuff to bump, it'll make our lives a lot easier and shorten the number of meetings we have.
I think there may be some value in what the deputy mayor is saying is looking at things and saying, okay, do we absolutely positively have to do that this year?
So the question is, do we do that tonight, Your Worship? Or I know Councillor Harrison
Yeah.
expressed, I know he's not here, but it happens. We all miss meetings from time to time. I would hate to go through that.
Yeah.
Because
I
he
agree.
misses one meeting, he doesn't get an input on what capital projects we do or we don't. Not to say we couldn't go back, but in the same sense, I don't want to go back and do this whole exercise again. So it would be good to maybe have,
One night.
Well,
One
and
night.
Councillor Bishop's not here as well.
same thing, but I know
Yeah.
Councillor Harrison sent us the message saying he was hoping to get some input.
Well, look, could we make this the very first thing that we deal with at the next budget meeting?
It was pretty quick last time we did
Yeah.
it. It was like a 15 to 20 minute
And
exercise.
it's going to give everybody an opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Spear, for going through that exercise in 21 or 22 minutes. It gave me some ideas that I would want to look at this before the next budget meeting and say, this is the one I would cut. And then we'll at least do a little bit of homework and we'll do that exercise as the first exercise at the next meeting.
And I think, Your Worship, too, we've cut between the Prince of Wales project and managing the wharf project. That's going to have a whole different look too. So it'll give us an opportunity to do an amendment budget that we'll get out before the next meeting.
Yeah.
So you can have, I know everyone likes to get home early. We still have half an hour. The utility's always a little easier. Do you want to continue through that tonight, or are we going to call it an evening?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add on just on that is just for staff's perspective too, is I'd really like to hear green light, red light, yellow light, which basically means green, yet we need it. Like, we need to know the ones that you guys need, and then the red lights, the ones that you don't think that we could defer essentially. And yellow is, maybe let's have a conversation, because that would be good. Because essentially in those other exercises we did it, you guys are the ones that came back to say, we can defer this. You guys actually led that process.
Yeah. So the question is, can we spend 15 minutes on the utility budget and just go through it and see what we,
Could I
Thanks,
raise,
Councillor Drew.
Yeah.
I'd just
Councillor
like to
Rousseau.
raise a quick point which may be of some bearing here and might, when I look at the debt analysis for the utility fund, I'm noting that in 2024 and in particular 2025, the debt service ratio is at 55%, which is 5% above what the province considers the danger level, where the alarm bells go off and they start sending people in to check on you. And I think that for me, when I read that, it sort of signaled to me that, boy, do we need some sort of change in our utility rates so that we can avoid that catastrophe. And perhaps that might be something you can look at in going to maybe a revised version and say, okay, what is a good rate of debt that we're comfortable with? And how do we get to that comfort level? And in terms of increased rates, because our rates are very low right now. Or do we start canceling or deferring some of these projects? And I think,
well, I agree with you. I think we need to look at that, but I think
Yeah.
tonight, the most we can accomplish in a few minutes here, importantly, might be to go through the capital projects for the utility and go through that exercise. And then we will have to have the revenue exercise or discussion.
okay.
Although, Your Worship, I agree with Councillor Drew, but it may bounce back to think about this as you've got 6 months left in your mandate. So it's
Right.
an important discussion and we can bump it up, but he probably won't feel in a position to raise the rates
Right.
a few months before your term ends.
If I could, the beauty of all this with 6 months in our mandate, and I love this, is we don't have to do anything. All we have to do is put it in the budget that we're raising the rates. And say the revenues have increased by 20% in year 2022 and another 20% in 2023, and everything looks hunky-dory. And then it's the next council that has to figure out how to do it.
And I guess actually one other question, Council, if we're going to revise, I told you earlier about that we couldn't find anyone that was going to voluntarily come run the fitness center, that we're going to have to go out. Did you want staff to include the cost of building and running one of our own, or that's off the table, just as a discussion point?
Oh,
Wouldn't be my favorite, but I know that the
what, building
fitness center was your.
running the fitness center ourselves? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that right now we don't have anyone that's volunteered, so I'm going to go looking for people to see that they partner up with us. So now in the budget process, we've got to decide if we can't find a partner, is the council wanting to include equipment and try to figure out an operational model that works for everybody, or no?
How is the RFP process going?
It closed on Monday. No submissions.
No submission?
No submissions. I'm going to get 2 more to catch on.
Oops.
Well, no, because I think soliciting is another option, and Mr. Spear, it doesn't violate the Purchasing Act. You've got that all under control, so we can do that. But my inclination is that we said from the beginning, we don't want to run a fitness center. We don't want to own fitness equipment and have Terry to have to figure out how our fitness equipment is depreciating in place and is worth less than it was 5 years ago. We want someone to operate it as a business on our terms. And if we can't solicit anybody to do that, we might have to have this discussion, or we might have to defer the fitness center. It was an add-on anyway, and an important one, and it's part of the age-appropriate community. It's all that stuff. I agree. I think it's important, but for us to run around and buy fitness equipment, I'm certainly in favor of buying brand new equipment for the wellness center because it's going to open before we're finished, you know, and, but the fitness center, if it isn't up and running at the same time, it isn't up and running at the same time. Because then we're getting into staff costs, we're getting into all kinds of things that,
Agreed, Your Worship, and certainly it's not staff's wish to have to run a fitness center by any stretch, but it was a key interest of this
oh,
council, so I thought I'd bring it to your attention. And if you
Sure.
don't want it to move forward, then.
well, that's
Let
just
me
me.
rephrase it, that we don't want
Yeah,
that us to include it in the budget, and that's all I was asking at this stage.
There is a need for a fitness room though, like for yoga and things like that. So if that's
Yeah.
what it is at first, then that's what it is at first.
Agreed.
And there's not a lot of overhead with such a space. So, and there's a lot of demand for that type of space in this community. Yeah.
No question.
Without all the equipment.
Right. So we just continue to try to find an operator, and if no one shows up, we open it up for less than fitness equipment. That makes a sense. That seems sensible to me, that the space could still be used.
Okay, Worship, thank you, and council, thank you for
The
your
old Algonquin Fitness Center used to work on a volunteer kind of basis where people would volunteer their time in exchange for memberships. Maybe that's some sort of similar model might be an option, or like a co-op kind of thing.
We'll look at various options. Really, for tonight's discussion, it was just whether or not it should be included in the budget. That's all. It's a good retirement project for Councillor Gumashell, I think.
Just an aside,
Councilor Grew?
yeah, there may be an opportunity here. I know the New Horizons for Seniors program, their deadline for submissions is 20th of October. And one of the things that they mentioned specifically is fitness equipment for seniors. So maybe if we get together with the age-friendly community and put in a $25,000 grant request for fitness equipment for seniors in this room, it might be looked upon favorably.
And we're actually already in the process of doing that.
Okay.
The town clerk is part of that committee on behalf of staff.
Okay.
And they've already looking for suggestions from other people in the community that they will be submit to council probably soon, because they're aware of the deadline. So within a couple of weeks, you'll see their suggestions and a request for that. But they aren't aware of the fitness facility, so that'll be new to them.
Good new dimension.
Yeah.
I mean, the model of having a fitness center where there's 15 machines and you go 1, 2, 3, because you don't really know what to do.
Right.
It does the thing for you is kind of the thing
You're
of the
right.
past.
Yeah.
Mostly it's having just free weights and someone to show you how to do it.
Yep.
Question.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we can do it that way, but I think that's another option. That's a good option to pursue, because if we got free equipment, that we'll get it. If somebody else pay for it, that's dandy.
Sorry, the utility department, I'll get you out of here by 8 o'clock, I promise. So in 2021, there's actually, within the last utility bylaw, we're on page 27. There was an inflationary clause of 2%, so the 2%, all things else being equal, will definitely go through. So the revenue is about 950,000, going up to a little over $1 million. One thing I'll fix, Your Worship, is I know the water cost for fire protection was supposed to be at 75,000. It just got mistakenly inflated too. So that should be 75,000. It won't have a dramatic effect on the budget, but we've had that discussion in the last few years. The admin costs are basically staying the same. The cost really, we've incurred a lot of cost in the last year and a half, as you know, upgrading the facility, and the thing's in pretty good shape right now. I don't see any really big increases unless council wants to flip through this significantly on the operations. But we'll say we've got our readings done, and the water bills should be out in the next couple of weeks. And the billing that we had on here, we'll update it, and the projected for this year is going to be pretty close. so if we jump to page 30, we'll talk about the capital. Whoop. Okay, I just noticed. Oh, it's not, never mind, sorry. Okay, so capital. So budget 2021, so the steel reservoirs up for reconditioning be similar to what we had in the concrete reservoir, I think. Painted on the outside. Oh, it's inside outside, so it's not that same liner. So that's about $300,000. This will be the second time it's been done in my time here. I think it's about every 10 to 15 years that has to be done. Yeah.
I have a question on that. Do you know the timing when that would be if it does pass for 2021, when you would actually do that project?
It had, well,
Reason being is I think we all know that that's obviously the round water tower that everyone likes, just because I think we know that that painting is definitely adds to our community versus a.
so be in the spring, it has to warm up a little bit for them to work, but we want to do it before the summer because you have to take it offline for a few weeks. So we'd be all the town water to go through the concrete reservoir.
And how big of an inconvenience is it to run through the concrete reservoir? Like if it ran an extra couple weeks, would that be the end of the world? The reason being is to paint it, it has condensation. Like you've got to, there's certain times a year you can only paint it. So it depends when that project happens. Otherwise, if it wasn't filled, then they could paint it at that time. I'm for my own budgeting purposes, I guess, but it benefits the town. End of May. Is that concrete reservoir enough to provide for the community, assuming, knock on wood, no major fires and everything like that? Yes. Yeah.
We do have the capacity at the water treatment plant too that can pump pretty fast. So even if we had a major fire, it would be able to keep up fairly good to that.
Okay. Thank you.
But if the summer season comes, that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I think in the spring, I think at your timing though, that might be pretty good timing for painting. I'll have to check. Assuming we want to do that.
Yeah. And if it goes through, Deputy Mayor, I think we could work with the contractors in discussion. I mean, we don't have to necessarily wait till the contractors are out. They have to paint the outside, and then before the art mural can start. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they leave and
okay, I'll find out the ideal time for painting and then we'll circle back.
So the commercial meter program for $50,000 under our current bylaw, anything over a 5/8 meter is actually supposed to be supplied by the property owner or the user. But if you remember in the discussion with Gary Eisner and company back a while ago, he says, well, they have no reason to replace them because they just wear out with time. So we think it's in the town's best interest to probably start replacing some of those, and those things for the bigger meters are expensive. They can be $5,000 or better. But we think for what we're potentially losing in revenue, we could make up for it. So it is our suggestion that we start, and that $50,000 isn't going to do all of them, but it's going to do some of the significant ones and the ones that have aged out. So we think that's a project worth doing. Can we get by without it? Yes, but we think it's in the best interest of the town to do it.
Altogether, roughly how many commercial meters would have to be replaced over time? Like not all in the same year though, right? Is it?
There's 60 meters.
Okay.
Probably only 10 of them are new.
Right.
And so depending, they're all like the smaller meters, 1 inch, 2 inch aren't as expensive. But if you get into this 4 and 5 and 6 inch ones, then they cost a small fortune.
Right.
So just since we're on meters, we're only looking at commercial only, not residential. Is that correct?
Pardon?
We're only looking at commercial only, not residential.
So the commercial or the residential meters are 5/8, and there's a lot of smaller businesses like say restaurants and things that are still on the 5/8, but these are just higher use. So like larger facilities like say the lodge, schools.
For sure. Just what I'm weighing out is we should technically have a long-term plan to get the meters up and running. This flat rate billing is not the best thing. Like we have an environmental action plan and then we're going to do flat rate billing. It's not acceptable today. I understand how we got here, but we need to try to find a solution, which is a huge expense. But just to say that we're gonna do flat rate billing forever, I don't think,
No, I agree.
I think that's problematic as a community. Especially with one water source.
Soccer field water exemption.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that, but again, a lot of that's going to depend on where there is access to other levels of government and money to put that in place, you know.
Absolutely, but like a summer like this, it could have, we're very fortunate that not a lot of people actually have caught on yet, because with the drought that we had and people realize that their bill doesn't go out and their grass is turning brown and they can just walk it to it without any extra cost, eventually it's going to be a problem for us. And again, what's the point of having an environmental plan if we're telling people it doesn't matter how much water they use in our community? It's just,
Yeah. Other than when you think about the cost of, I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying let's weigh the cost of meters, which is substantial. We're talking $1 million or something, aren't we, Chris, for commercial,
So
residential meters?
it depends, your worship. So what we'd looked before, one of the Cadillac versions would be UV, or not UV, RF meters, which essentially is a radio frequency, which means we could drive around town. Staff will have to look at what the cost is. The problem is some of these meters will have to be repiped and things, and it could be costly that way. And then, as you know, not everyone's home during the day, so you may have to hire plumbers. We probably don't have the capacity in town staff to replace them all. But each meter runs about $125 times, say 900 meters, quick, $90,000, $90,000 to $100,000 just in meters. And then on top of that, you're gonna have potentially some extra labor costs and stuff. So it could be $150,000 to $200,000. Could be spread over several years for sure.
Okay, so it's not what I thought, sorry.
no, it's still, don't get-
It's still, no, it's not insignificant.
But
I
it's the
guess what
labor costs of reading all those meters.
Yeah,
Radio frequency is pretty easy, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
literally you'd get,
So
the
it's-
employee would get in his truck and just drive up and down the streets and pick it up, and you slap it in a computer, and a couple of days later you have a water bill.
what percentage of communities would be on flat rate billing now? Is still a lot of them, or
On
like,
flat rate,
yeah,
well, it depends how you want to look at that, but so out of 950 meters, we'll say, only 60 are being billed on consumption. The rest of them are all flat.
no, but like how many other communities would just be on flat rate billing because they don't have proper meter systems in place anymore?
I'd have to go,
Or
it
ever.
varies, like St. John, a very big customer, is still flat rate for smaller individuals. St. Stephen, are they meter read? Their meters, so St. Stephen's meter read. St. George is flat for residential and metered for large users.
Right.
So it's-
Black's Harbor, I'm not sure.
So it's scattered.
Yeah,
But back to your point, it certainly is, there's a lot of people that brought it up, that both economically and from a consumption basis, it's more fair to be on a metered program. It's just, to get back there for us, it's going to be significant time, but I'm not saying it's the right thing. So staff will look at it and maybe provide a quick cost and a quick guesstimate of what it would
Yeah.
take, because not all those meters have to be replaced, but a significant portion, probably half or better, do. So we'll have to go through, because we still have a reading or data on that, what isn't new.
The good part is the capital costs of such a program can be incorporated into the water rate.
sure. No, exactly, yeah. Yeah, make people pay for their own meter. Essentially.
I'll flip, your worship, I'll try to go through the rest of this fairly quick.
Sorry, we
No, no need to apologize.
distracted you.
I have a problem, why, sorry.
So about halfway down the page, a portable generator for power outages. That's for the new lift stations along Water Street. So currently, when the power goes out in the area, they relatively minor cost. Let's see, the UV chamber, we've done half of the overhaul this year, but $20,000 to do the rest. That's bulbs and, that'd be just bulbs on the screens. Just bulbs on the UV chamber, yeah. Oh, and the screens for the backwash are 10,000. That's a horrible chore, but Mr. Reddick's been doing. Electric motors for pumps. You have to remind me on that one, Terry. Oh, okay. There, we just saved 8,000. You're welcome. Going to the next page. The sewage lagoon, as we've told you in the past, the liner was originally replaced in 2010 as they upgraded it, but we had some issues with the aerators and the lines they're on that fell in. So it's going to be about $100,000 just to replace a portion of, or repair, I guess it's not portion, it's all over the place, but it's a repair of the current liner. Should give us another 30 or 40 years as a percentage of the liner, just to give you an idea of what we tear, about 15% or less. So less than 15%.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be dislodged. That's part of the problem is everything, all the material that's in there has to be removed and shipped out. So that's part of the cost, or a lot of the cost. Aerator blower unit, that's just in a lagoon, I'm assuming, that the couple of them that pumps the water in to allow, you know, the continued treatment of the water. The big project next year is the $437,000 from Prince of Wales for water mains. And then below that, the next page is $124,000 for sanitary mains. Again, that was only added because of the project along King Street, or sorry, the walking lane between King Street and the Van Horn Trail. That can be deferred into the future by a few years. So that could be removed immediately.
Is that both of them, Chris?
Yeah. Nope. Sorry, is that? Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So that'd be part of, we would have to replace that first, of course, if we did the one like we did walking.
So
Can that one be
437 could be
deferred, Terry,
eliminated.
or-
437, that's all water main for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be deferred, okay.
Okay.
And what about the one,
But sanitary, it's not, that's
Yeah.
a different
oh, is it? So the
We're in rough shape
124
for
has to
this,
be.
eh?
Oh, yeah, well, right, well, if we defer that project, then
Oh,
we're in
okay.
good shape.
But the next few years, like if
Yeah, well,
So, but what we might do though, Your Worship, to be honest, if we're going to defer that, we might move projects that were posted for like 2022 and back them up just to add a little bit of balance because we've postponed stuff next year in order to do the Prince of Wales segment.
Okay.
So we'll play with those numbers in the next version, just to
okay.
show our priorities now that we know that walking lane is going to be abandoned for at least the time being.
Sounds like they had the stars all lined up in the picture.
yeah, but is it safe, looking at this, is it safe to just say that we're in big trouble with our water mains? Like, look at the debt, like,
Yeah.
are we in big trouble? Like, should we just acknowledge that right now that, like, if you look at the growth and debt servicing, like, we're doubling our debt service ratio over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I won't say we're in trouble because a lot of our lines are younger than some of the lines in sister communities. Again, following best practices of the asset management policy. But if this council or future councils wants to defer some, they can be deferred without risking the safety of everybody. But it does increase the chance of a midwinter break on a Friday night at 2 a.m. For these things. So it's not really a health matter, but it is a engineering matter, well, as far as how long these things will continue to operate.
As I said earlier, I think the real issue here is we have to look at how much we're charging for utilities. And it's on a cost recovery basis. So if we're seeing the debt service ratio double in 5 years, it tells me that we haven't got that cost recovery formula tweaked as well as we should have.
Yeah, well, possibly, but it was also, there's quite a jump, if you remember, 2 years ago between the old rate schedule and this rate schedule.
Yeah.
And I don't think council was willing to go too much over and above what they had suggested last
The
time.
next council.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Terry in the next 5 years is going to have all sorts of surprises for us as we move forward. So we got to be prepared for those as well. Anyway, thanks.
But the hope is that there will be significant money. It has been a few years since there's been significant investment from the federal government. And with all this talk of economic recovery, what most economists say, the best way to do it is through infrastructure projects. It's the most efficient way to get the money out and create the most jobs. And so right now we have very little funding. It looks like 10 or 12%, but in a good year we get 50 or 60% funding. And so we've got to hope that comes along really fast.
So if it didn't arrive soon, perhaps we could put it back on the table. All right.
It's all up to council.
That's a
A
nice
dog
safe
with a bone
answer.
here.
So it's deferred with an asterisk. Asterisk.
Deferred to next council.
Asterisk. Come on.
You can prepare your argument for the next meeting, Councilor Gumichel, and convince your other councilors why it's such a good thing. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah,
Staff
no,
has done its
thank you, Mr.
presentation
Spear,
for
that's
tonight.
good. And so you're going to come back on that and look at whether there might be some of those projects from 2022 that could be brought forward if we're not going to do the big project on Prince of Wales.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee it, looking at Terry, that there was
Okay.
stuff we postponed one year in order to bring the Prince of Wales
Right,
up.
so
We're
we'll,
just juggling things to council's priorities, that's
yeah,
all.
we'll have that to look at the next time. Okay, excellent. Thank you. And
Please spell asterisk.
Mr. Knocker,
Shift 8.
I guess it's question period. Do we have anybody who needs to ask us questions?
Through your worship, there's only been one comment on Facebook, and it was actually directed towards Chris Spear. Local resident will be making contact about the fitness center, willing to volunteer and support. Beyond that, we only have Vic Miller on, and I asked them to write anything in the sidebar, and we have no questions.
Say hi to Vic for all of us, okay? He's still trapped in Florida, is he?
He is.
He is, okay. Good. The, no, we're not going to close. Is it something that we need to go to? Is it urgent?
Quickly, just an update, the thing we talked about earlier, your worship, last week.
Before we go to close,
What's that?
I have something before we go to close.
Oh,
I have something before we go.
before we go to close. Oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
couldn't hear you.
This is Orange T-shirt Day for the Indigenous people. So to remember the residential school survivors, their families on this day. So I know I didn't see as many orange T-shirts as usually we have out, but I think COVID is, doing its share of keeping us in the dark. But just to let you know that it still is an issue with the Indigenous people, and that October 4th will be Sisters in Spirit, which is the murdered and missing Indigenous people who have gone missing. So to think of them on October 4th and to think today of the residential school survivors, please do.
Yes, Councilor, beyond the 4th, is there any sign, some of the orange T-shirt that people usually wear?
There isn't, they have like the red shirts for, red dresses were displayed, and they had the billboards made of the ones that were missing in New Brunswick, and they were on display, but because NBCC, I'm not there, I think they're doing something with, sending it out on Facebook or whatever, but there is a banner, they have a banner and whatnot, but again, not all the students are there, so there isn't anything to wear. The women wear purple because that's their favorite color, but it's the red dress is the memory of those that have been killed, the women and children.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji.
Council, actually be happy to know that I saw a lot of orange T-shirts at VMES today, actually. So,
Yeah, a lot of the schools do it the day before, but it's really September the 30th, the last day in September. And that's due to the start of the Orange T-shirt Day. But it's great to see. I didn't see many yesterday, and today when I was out and about, I didn't see as many as there have been, because we've always, tried to remember them. It's a tough time for families. Thank you.
Okay, we do need to go to closed session. What's that? Okay, okay, motion to go into closed session, please. Thank you, Councillor Grew, and the second, Councillor Grew, Michelle, all in favor?
Aye.
None? Okay, we're in closed session. So-
Get the mics off.
Next minute break for you. So I want you to see, turn it up, and we're not breaking.
Not fair, you get